items, like do the laundry, prep for the 10 a.m. marketing meeting, call the plumber. Instead of all that, you look at the screen and see a list labeled sacred ceremonies.
I mean, most people would probably assume they accidentally opened a meditation app, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because our daily schedules are almost universally framed as survival mechanisms. We build these lists of obligations, frictions, and like hurdles we have to clear just to get to the end of the day.
Just to survive until Friday, basically.
Exactly. So the idea of waking up to a schedule framed entirely around joyful creation and contemplative presence, it feels completely alien. It challenges the fundamental way modern humans structure their existence.
It feels impossible, honestly. Like I was reviewing the source material for this deep dive, which is a highly unusual, just fascinating audio manifesto.
Oh, it really is something else.
It is. It's a recording officially titled #07 QuantaFractosis Bliss Nap Music, and then in parentheses, 2hoursproductions.m4a.
What a title.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And through this audio file, we get a direct look into the mind of a creator named Roland. And Roland casually refers to himself as a god of transcendence.
Yeah, which is a jarring title and a seriously jarring self-proclamation.
Oh, completely.
Whenever someone attaches the word God to their own identity, especially in like an MP3 file, the modern listener's defense mechanisms immediately go up.
Oh, for sure. My immediate cynical reaction was to brace myself for some kind of pretentious, delusion-fueled rant.
We expect a cult of personality, right? Or
Yeah.
just hollow grandiosity.
Exactly. I was absolutely ready to dismiss him. But then I started looking at the actual tangible output of his life. We aren't talking about someone sitting in a basement dreaming about being creative while doing nothing.
No, not at all.
The statistics he provides about his life's work are just staggering. Over a span of 29 years, Roland estimates he has amassed over 50 million modeling image downloads.
Which, I mean, think about the mechanics of that number for a second. 50 million individual decisions by human beings across the globe to engage with, download, and utilize a piece of his visual art.
It's massive.
It really is. That requires an infrastructure of creation that goes far, far beyond a casual weekend project.
And it gets wilder. He estimates 200 million direct views and a total of 2.1 billion offline and online views over his career.
2.1 billion. That's just hard to even wrap your head around.
2.1 billion. Plus, he has produced 12 to 14 educational courses, authored 40 to 50 books, and uploaded more than 700 online videos.
That volume is insane.
It really is. When you encounter a volume of work like that, you have to throw out the assumption that this is just a delusional guy with a microphone. There is a relentless, almost terrifying level of momentum here.
Well, a creator doesn't hit 50 books and hundreds of videos by accident, you know.
Definitely not.
That level of output requires an internal engine that never runs out of fuel. Most artists burn out after their third book or maybe their 50th video.
Yeah, they just hit a wall.
They hit a massive wall of creative exhaustion. But Roland hasn't hit that wall in 3 decades.
Which brings us to the actual mission of this deep dive. The goal here isn't just to gawk at a guy with 2 billion views, right? I want to extract the blueprint.
I love that.
Yeah, I want to know how a human being designs a life where creativity isn't just a hobby you try to squeeze in on a Sunday afternoon, but the absolute undeniable core of their existence.
Right, the center of everything.
Exactly. We are going to decode Roland's philosophy, analyze his highly inventive vocabulary, and most importantly, break down the psychological and tactical systems he uses.
Because there is a very real possibility that we can apply the mechanics of this creative liberation to our own lives.
Yes. So we have to start with a foundational shift in his entire worldview. Roland explicitly states that his passions are no longer hobbies.
He completely rejects that word.
He really does. He refuses to categorize them as occasional activities. Instead, he redefines them. In his words, his passions have become living ceremonies through which I celebrate source, beauty, wisdom, and life itself.
That's a powerful reframe.
It is. He calls himself an architect of existence and says his life is living art. Okay, let's unpack this, because that word hobby carries so much hidden psychological baggage.
It really does. It minimizes the activity.
Totally. I always think of hobbies as a side dish, right? They're the scoop of mashed potatoes sitting next to the massive, heavy main course of our real jobs, our mortgages, our paying careers.
We treat the main course with immense seriousness.
Exactly, and the side dish is just something nice to have if we get around to it. Roland has essentially taken that side dish, thrown the main course entirely in the trash, and made the side dish the entire banquet.
That is a great analogy.
But I mean, I have a serious bone to pick with this concept. I have to push back here.
Let's hear it.
Isn't it exhausting? Treating every single drawing, every walk in the woods, every photograph you take as a sacred practice or an act of worship.
You think it adds pressure?
I do.
Yeah.
If I decide that my morning cup of coffee has to be a sacred living ceremony, the cognitive load of that sounds unbearable. Sometimes I just want to drink the caffeine and stare blankly at the wall,
Just fuel up and go.
Yeah. Doesn't elevating the mundane to the realm of the sacred put an unbelievable amount of pressure on daily life?
Well, what's fascinating here is that assumes the sacred requires heavy, solemn effort. Your reaction is based on our cultural understanding of ceremony, right?
I guess so, yeah.
We usually associate ceremony with rigid religious rituals, formal clothing, strict rules. We equate sacred with serious.
That's true. It sounds heavy.
But Roland's mechanism works entirely differently. By framing his passions as living ceremonies, he is actively removing what he calls unnecessary seriousness.
Oh, interesting.
He notes that in his life, wonder has replaced routine, and playfulness has replaced unnecessary seriousness. The exhaustion you are worried about comes from the friction of expectation.
Like expecting the coffee to be perfect or expecting the drawing to be a masterpiece.
Exactly. When we engage in a hobby, even subconsciously, our ego often demands an outcome. Like, I am painting this so I can hang it up, or I am practicing guitar so I can impress people.
Which makes it feel like work.
Yes. That outcome dependence is exactly what makes hobbies feel like work. A ceremony, in the way Roland uses the term, is entirely about presence. It is about being fully alive in the moment of the action, totally independent of the result.
So the value metric shifts completely. The value isn't the finished painting. The value is the physical act of moving the brush.
Spot on.
He actually says this in the recording, like, hand drawing becomes meditation, photography has become contemplation, videos have become acts of service.
It is a total rewiring of the brain's reward system. The word hobby implies triviality, something you do to distract yourself from the real work of survival.
Right.
By eradicating that label and replacing it with sacred practice, he demands a level of respect for his own joy. It changes the hierarchy of his day.
That makes a lot of sense.
Think about how easily people cancel their hobbies. You have a tough day at the office, you skip the gym, or you don't write that chapter of your novel.
Because it's just a hobby. It's expendable.
But you don't skip a sacred ceremony. You build your life around it. And the psychological consequence of this shift is profound.
I can imagine.
Roland observes that his imagination has expanded beyond limitation, leading to deep originality. When you remove the triviality of a task and approach it with reverence and wonder, the brain stops trying to find shortcuts. It lingers. It observes.
I want you, the listener, to pause and actually run this thought experiment on your own life. Think about your favorite creative outlet.
Yeah, really think about it.
Maybe it's gardening, maybe it's coding an indie video game, maybe it's baking bread. What would functionally change in your brain if you stopped calling it a hobby?
If you stop treating it as the expendable mashed potatoes of your life.
Exactly. If you viewed the act of kneading dough not as a task to get a loaf of bread, but as a living ceremony to celebrate the chemistry of life.
You would stop rushing through it. You would protect the time you dedicate to it. And interestingly, this philosophical shift doesn't mean abandoning the practical reality of living.
Right. He still pays his bills.
Exactly. Roland points out that his passions naturally evolved into meaningful creations, videos, premium artistic experiences, and that financial abundance followed. His livelihood and his passions exist in beautiful harmony, rather than in opposition.
That sounds idyllic, but it brings up a actual question. Ethereal reverence is lovely, but how do you...
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. How do you create 40 to 50 books and hundreds of videos without degrading into resentment? Because eventually, writing a book requires sitting in a chair and staring at a blank page.
It does.
To understand how he bypasses the resentment, we have to look at the exact mechanism of his creative process. Specifically, who he thinks is doing the creating.
This is where we transition from lifestyle design into something that borders on the mystical but actually has deep roots in cognitive psychology.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. There's a pivotal moment in this audio file. Roland declares something that completely reframes the creative act.
What does it say?
He says, I no longer ask, what should I create? Instead, I ask, what wishes to be created through me?
Wow.
He views creation not as an individual struggle, but as a secret partnership where inspiration flows effortlessly. He believes that source expresses itself through every creative act.
The mechanism at play here is just fascinating. Let's look at the neurology of the traditional creative process.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you sit down and demand of yourself, what should I create today? You are activating the ego. You are placing the entire burden of generation on your conscious mind.
Which immediately triggers the inner critic.
Yeah.
That is the exact recipe for the dreaded blank page syndrome, total paralysis.
Oh, absolutely.
I've been there. You look at the screen, your ego steps in, and you start judging the idea before it's even typed out. Is this good enough? Will people like this? Does this sound stupid?
The anxiety is crippling.
It is. Because the success or failure of the idea is entirely tied to your self-worth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's because your ego is terrified of failure. By surrendering agency, by shifting the question to what wishes to be created through me, Roland completely bypasses that neurological roadblock.
That's brilliant.
He views himself merely as a vessel, a conduit. This isn't a new concept, historically speaking, by the way. We can trace this directly back to ancient Greece and Rome.
Like the concept of the muse.
Yes, exactly. The Greeks had the demons, and the Romans translated that into the concept of the genius.
Wait, so genius used to be a separate thing?
Yes. In antiquity, you didn't have genius, and you certainly weren't a genius. A genius was an external divine entity that lived in the walls of your house or came to visit you when you were working.
That's wild.
If you wrote a brilliant play, it was because your genius showed up.
That framework is incredibly protective of a creator's mental health. Think about the buffer that creates.
Huge buffer.
If Roland produces an image that gets downloaded 50 million times, he doesn't let it inflate his ego to the point of destructive arrogance. It was a beautiful gift from the source that flowed through him.
He can be grateful, but he doesn't have to carry the weight of being a godlike creator in his conscious mind.
And the inverse is arguably more important. If a project completely fails, if he spends months on a video and nobody watches it, it is not a reflection of his fundamental worth as a human being.
Not at all.
The universe was just trying an idea out, and it didn't resonate. He was just the partner in the process.
Oh.
The vessel isn't blamed for the taste of the water.
Exactly. But, I can see some people pushing back on this.
Oh, totally. I have to play devil's advocate here. Is it a delusion? Like, if I write a terrible, poorly researched book and then tell my publisher, hey, I didn't write it, source wrote it, isn't that just a sophisticated way of dodging accountability? Is he just lying to himself to avoid the pain of criticism?
Well, it might be a functional fiction, but whether it is objectively true or just the psychological placebo doesn't actually matter because the result is flow state.
Hey.
By adopting this mindset, you lower the cognitive friction required to start working. Roland says every experience becomes creative material, every observation becomes inspiration, every idea becomes potential creation.
Because you aren't filtering it through fear.
Exactly. When you are no longer the sole generator of the ideas, but rather the receiver of them, the pressure is off. You just have to remain open and observant. The world transforms into a constant, unending feed of material.
You become a translator rather than an inventor. Source expresses itself through every creative act. I genuinely love that framing. It feels incredibly liberating.
It really is.
But, and this is a massive flashing neon but, how does this ethereal flowing partnership with Source actually result in a finished product?
That's the catch, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, ethereal flow states are great for sitting on a porch and writing poetry in a journal, but ethereal flow doesn't edit 700 videos. Ethereal flow doesn't format the margins on 50 published books.
No, it certainly does not.
To actually execute at that scale, Roland introduces a shocking juxtaposition in his audio manifesto.
The transition in the recording is quite severe. We move from the boundless, infinite flow of universal source directly into the rigid mechanics of extreme behavioral tracking.
I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing when I got to this part of the recording. Roland tells a story about coming back from a 4 or 5 day holiday in Manchester.
A nice little break.
Yeah. He walks in his door. And what does he do? Does he light some incense, assume the lowest position, and wait for the muse to whisper to him?
Apparently not.
No. He states that he immediately sat down and filled out his, and I'm quoting this verbatim, Transcendence Calendar Planner, Tracker Exeter Optimizer for the next 2 years.
Wow.
He planned it. He prioritized his goals in a spreadsheet, and he claims that out of this highly structured planning session came the lyrics for 8 new music videos.
A transcendence calendar, planner tracker, Exeter optimizer. The language alone is a collision of worlds.
I cannot let this slide. I have to push back hard on this apparent contradiction. Planner tracker, executor, optimizer.
It sounds like a software suite.
It sounds like pure, unadulterated corporate middle management jargon. That sounds like a quarterly earnings report for logistics supply chain.
Very corporate.
It does not sound like the vocabulary of a god of transcendence who believes source flows through him like water. How in the world do we reconcile this hyper-organized, granular spreadsheet-level tracking with his sweeping, poetic statement that living itself has become my greatest creative masterpiece?
It feels disjointed.
You cannot be a deity of limitless artistic flow while obsessively updating cells in Microsoft Excel. It's fundamentally contradictory.
This raises an important question, though. It seems contradictory only if we operate under the romanticized illusion of what artistic freedom actually requires.
What do you mean?
We have been conditioned to view structure and freedom as enemies. We assume that to be truly free, truly artistic, you must reject all schedules, burn your calendar, and let the wind take you where it may.
Yeah, the bohemian lifestyle.
Exactly. But Roland is demonstrating a psychological reality that high-level performers understand deeply. Extreme artistic freedom actually requires a fiercely protected environment.
I'm struggling to see how a 2-year executor spreadsheet creates freedom, though. It sounds like a prison sentence.
Think of it like the banks of a river.
Okay, I hear the riverbanks metaphor a lot. But a 2-year plan isn't a riverbank, it's a concrete dam. Doesn't planning your transcendence 2 years out completely kill the spontaneity of this source he claims to channel?
If he were planning the actual content of his art 2 years out, perhaps, but he is planning the space for the art.
Oh, I see the distinction.
Without the rigid banks of a river, the water of creativity just spreads out in every direction, loses its momentum, and turns into a shallow, stagnant swamp.
Just a muddy puddle of good intentions.
Exactly. The tracker, the calendar, the optimizer, these aren't dictating what the source says. They are ensuring he is sitting at the desk when the source speaks.
Okay, that clarifies it.
Roland explicitly says he has intentionally designed a life where creativity is protected. He builds beautiful creative environments, dedicated creation spaces, and creative studios. The structure is the fortress that guards his artistic freedom against the chaos of daily life.
Okay, that makes more sense. The spreadsheet isn't telling him what to paint. The spreadsheet is guarding the 3 hours he has scheduled to hold the paintbrush. Let's look at the actual bricks of this fortress, because he breaks his life down into very specific daily, weekly, and monthly protocols. And I think we need to deep dive into how these actually function in the human brain, rather than just listing them.
The daily protocols are definitely the most revealing regarding his mental state.
For his daily execution, his protocol includes things like drawing, walking in nature, resting deeply, spending time with loved ones, practicing everyday gratitude.
It sounds lovely.
It does. But one specific task caught my eye: capture beauty. He tracks the act of capturing beauty daily. I want to analyze this. What happens to a human brain when it is forced, via a rigid tracking system, to quantify an abstract concept like beauty every single day?
Oh, it creates a massive cognitive behavioral shift. It specifically leverages something in the brain called the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The RAS is the filter, right? The part of the brain that decides what information gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets ignored.
Exactly. At any given moment, your brain is bombarded with millions of bits of sensory data. You can't process it all, so your RAS filters out anything it deems unimportant.
Like white noise.
Right. But if you buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere on the highway.
Oh yeah, that always happens.
They were always there, but your RAS is now primed to notice them. By putting Capture Beauty on a daily tracker, Roland is actively programming his RAS.
Wow, he is hacking his own filter.
He really is.
If you know you have to check a box on your Transcendence Optimizer before you go to sleep that says you captured beauty, you literally have to walk through your day scanning your environment for it.
It becomes your mission.
You look at the way the light hits the pavement, or the geometry of a leaf, or the expression on a stranger's face. You force your brain to find it.
And because he tracks it, it becomes a neurological habit. The input of beauty becomes as routine as brushing his teeth. Notice what is missing from his daily list, though. There is no mention of grinding, answering emails, or hitting a financial quota. The daily requirements are entirely focused on internal foundation, restoration, and priming the mind for inspiration.
That's so true. The external output is pushed to the weekly protocol.
Right.
Weekly, he tracks publishing meaningful creative work, exploring somewhere beautiful, learning a new artistic technique, practicing performance, and sharing joyful experiences. He shifts from gathering materially to building the house weekly.
He is deliberately building what he calls a world-class body of creative works across multiple mediums. The weekly cadence prevents the daily contemplation from becoming self-indulgent. He forces the internal inspiration out into the external world.
And then we hit the monthly protocol, which contains perhaps the most subversive metric of all.
This is my favorite part.
Monthly, he completes one significant creative project, expands his conceptual language, and this is the kicker, he reviews for creative fulfillment rather than only productivity.
Reviewing for creative fulfillment rather than productivity. That single line dismantles the modern corporate mindset.
Think about how the average person measures their month. You look your bank account balance. You look you crossed off project management software at work. You measure how much you produced.
It's all about output and capital.
Yes. But what if, at the end of last 30 days, your primary metric of success was, did I learn a new artistic technique? Did I explore somewhere beautiful? Was my soul fulfilled?
If you change the metric of success, you change the entire trajectory of your behavior. By tracking fulfillment, he ensures he's constantly refreshing the well of inspiration.
He never burns out.
Exactly. He never runs out of things to create because he never lets the well run dry. He treats his psychological restoration with the exact same ruthless spreadsheet-level tracking as a CEO treats quarterly profits.
And that tracking of restoration brings us to one of the most bizarre yet compelling elements of Roland's philosophy. He's a very specific, highly branded way of resting that fuels this entire ecosystem.
It's incredibly unique.
It involves an entirely newly invented vocabulary.
Roland doesn't just experience the world, he actively renames it to fit his engineered reality. He engages in a profound level of linguistic world building.
We have to talk about the actual title of this audio file. Hashtag #07 QuantaFractosis Bliss nap music.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Right. He practices deep meditative restoration through what he calls QuantaFractosis Bliss naps. And out of his 2-year planning session, he didn't just write 8 songs. He invented a brand new genre of music to categorize them.
Of course he did.
He calls it zalization. He even spells it out in the recording to make sure you get it. Z-A-L-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N. And naturally, this new genre is managed by his own company named Zalization Sounds.
The audacity of it is what strikes people first, I think.
Oh, completely.
But beneath the audacity is a very calculated psychological tool. We are talking about linguistic relativity, the idea that the language and vocabulary we use actively shapes our perception of reality.
Like the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis.
Exactly. If you don't have a word for a concept, it's harder to experience the concept. So if you invent a new word, you are essentially inventing a new conceptual space in your brain.
That's wild. Let's analyze QuantaFractosis. Why are those specific phonetic sounds?
It's a great word to break down.
It sounds incredibly scientific, you know. You have quanta, implying quantum physics or deep foundational energy. You have fract, implying fractals, infinite repeating geometric pattern.
And then the ending.
Right. Osis, which is usually a medical suffix denoting a condition or state of being. He essentially smashed together quantum physics, sacred geometry, and biology to describe a nap.
And that is the brilliance of it. If he just told himself, I need to take a nap every day at 2 p.m., the brain associates nap with fatigue, laziness, or a lack of motivation.
Yeah, it feels like giving up.
Right. It carries a subtle guilt in our hyper-productive culture. But by elevating it to a QuantaFractosis Bliss nap, he transforms a basic biological necessity into a highly specialized, almost technological rebalance cycle for what he calls his sacred temple.
It's self-hypnosis intertwined with personal branding. A nap is what a tired person does. A QuantaFractosis Bliss nap is a strategic recovery protocol for an architect of existence.
Exactly. It elevates the mundane.
He also chants these very specific, unique phrases during his recordings. He repeats, transcending ka, zingabon, 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 zingabon.
It's mesmerizing in a way.
It is. Look at the phonetics of a word like zingabon.
The zigalizing utilizes a fricative and a high front vowel, which implies energy, sharpness, movement.
Like a spark.
Yes, and the A-bon uses a plosive and a nasal sound, which is grounding, rhythmic, and heavy. The repetition of it creates a very powerful auditory anchor. He's designing mantras that have no pre-existing cultural baggage.
That's a huge point.
Yeah.
If you chant a traditional Sanskrit mantra, your brain brings all its preconceived notions about yoga, spirituality, or Eastern religion into the moment.
Right, it's loaded with history.
But by inventing Zingabon, Roland gives his brain a completely blank slate. The word only means what he decides it means in that exact moment.
Precisely. He is building an isolated reality. By naming his genre's Alization, by calling his visual expressions the complete language of transcendence, he is constructing an architecture of meaning. An architect needs building materials, and for Roland, his invented words are the bricks.
Even if we don't start walking around the grocery store chanting Zingabon, there is something deeply practical we can extrapolate from
Oh,
it.
definitely.
How does consciously renaming our own habits change our relationship with the friction of daily life? Think about a daily commute.
The worst part of the day for many.
Right. If you hate sitting in traffic for 45 minutes every morning, your brain categorizes that time as wasted suffering. What if you actively chose to rename it your kinetic reflection period? Does the friction change?
It absolutely does.
What if doing the dishes isn't a chore, but a water meditation for environmental clearing?
It forces a cognitive reframe, it breaks the automatic negative association you have with the activity, and infuses a mundane moment with intention. You take back control of the narrative of your own life.
And all of this, the eradication of hobbies, the surrendering of the ego to source, the fiercely protected spreadsheets, the invented language of Zalization, all of these complex systems ultimately funnel down into one fundamental, inescapable rule in Roland's universe.
The core truth of his methodology.
Yes, it is the singular metric by which he judges the success of his entire existence.
It is the engine driving this massive machine of creation.
So what does this all mean? He states it very clearly, without any mystical jargon. He says, when the fun stops, transcendence stops. When you're having fun, you're transcending.
That might be the most radically subversive statement in the entire manifesto.
Subversive is the perfect word, because we exist in a modern hustle culture that doesn't just tolerate suffering, it actively glorifies it.
Oh, 100%. The grind is everything.
We are culturally conditioned to believe that growth requires pain, that success is measured by the amount of friction you overcome.
No pain, no gain.
Exactly. The prevailing narrative is that if you aren't bleeding for your art, if you aren't sacrificing your sleep for your startup, if you aren't grinding your teeth to the bone, you aren't a serious person. We fundamentally mistrust joy. We think the starving, miserable artist is the only authentic artist.
Roland entirely rejects that premise. He asserts that fun is not a distraction from spiritual and artistic growth. It is the literal mechanism of it.
The actual engine.
Yes. If you aren't having fun, you aren't transcending. The suffering isn't a badge of honor to be proudly displayed. It is an alarm bell signaling that you have derailed from your true nature.
He is proposing joy as the ultimate metric of human success, not the 2.1 billion views, not the financial abundance.
Which is wild, given how huge those numbers are.
Right. He acknowledges those things, but treats them as inevitable byproducts of a joyful system, not the goal of the system itself.
Philosophers often talk about the transcendentals, the core properties of being, like truth, love, goodness, harmony, and unity.
That sounds very serious.
They usually are. Historically, pursuing these meant solemn, rigid piety, monasteries, vows of silence, aesthetic denial.
The opposite of fun.
Right. But Roland aims to embody these exact same transcendentals, but through the vehicle of joy. He lays out his formula. Truth becomes expressive, love becomes creative, goodness becomes generosity, harmony becomes artistic, unity becomes experiential.
And the catalyst.
The catalyst for all of them is that joy becomes contagious.
And what I appreciate most is how he grounds this incredibly high-level, almost overwhelming spiritual philosophy in the most relatable, down-to-earth actions.
He keeps it very grounded.
He really does. In the exact same breath that he talks about expanding higher consciousness and embodying the stories of the universe, he explicitly mentions loving nature, playing with cats, cherishing family and friends.
Playing with the cat is given the exact same philosophical weight as hand-drawing a masterpiece or deep meditation.
Which is just beautiful.
It is, because if joy is the mechanism of transcendence, then anything that produces pure joy is a sacred act.
True mastery, as he defines it, isn't ascending to some lonely, isolated mountaintop away from the messy reality of the world. It is maintaining what he calls the childlike joy that keeps the soul alive, right in the middle of it.
Amidst all the chaos.
Exactly. And by living this way, loud and in public for 29 years, he is trying to offer a very specific gift to his audience.
He calls it his greatest artistic contribution. Permission.
Permission to create without needing to monetize it. Permission to play like a child. Permission to express yourself, even if you invent words that sound ridiculous to other people.
Permission to just be.
Yes. Permission to slow down and stare at a leaf. Permission to see beauty again. He wants his life, his statistics, and his audio manifestos to serve as an undeniable reminder that transcendence can be joyful.
And that permission is something millions of people are desperately waiting for.
We really are.
We lock ourselves in cages of adult seriousness, convinced that maturity requires a constant, low-level state of productive anxiety. People are waiting for an authority figure to hand them a hall pass and say, it is okay to put down the heavy burdens and just play.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for you, the listener. We've decoded Roland's immense output, his psychological buffers, his tactical spreadsheets, and his phonetic world building.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. But the only thing that actually matters is how this reflects on your own existence. Where has the fun stopped in your life?
And as a direct consequence, where has your personal growth, your creativity, or your transcendence completely stalled out because you allowed playfulness to be suffocated by unnecessary seriousness?
Did you stop painting because you decided you weren't good enough to sell them? Did you stop playing a sport because you got too old to be competitive?
Did you stop singing in the car because someone once told you that you were off-key?
Exactly. If the fun has stopped, the connection to that creative flow, the source, has almost certainly stopped with it. Roland's life stands as a massive, multi-billion view counter-argument to the belief that you have to suffer to be significant.
We've traced a remarkable path today. We began by observing the psychological eradication of the hobby, shifting our perspectives so that the things we love are elevated to sacred, living ceremonies.
We analyze the profound shift in creative agency, the mental health buffer of removing the ego and asking the universe what wishes to be created through us, rather than demanding our conscious minds generate perfection from scratch.
We dissected the paradox of spiritual tracking, exploring how intense, almost corporate-level structure, the calendars, the daily filters for beauty, the weekly output metrics, actually serve to build a fortress around artistic freedom rather than stifle it.
Such a paradigm shift.
It is. We also looked at how linguistic relativity and a personal vocabulary, from QuantaFractosis to Zalization, allows a creator to reframe their reality.
And finally, we landed on the absolute core of Roland's philosophy, that joy is the engine. When the fun stops, transcendence stops. It is a comprehensive, deeply challenging blueprint for a life devoted entirely to creative expression.
A truly fascinating case study.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Roland calls himself the architect of existence. We've seen how he actively builds environments, vocabularies, and schedules that literally force him to be creative.
He designed his world so that inspiration is a mechanical inevitability.
Exactly. If you were to look up from wherever you are listening to this right now and examine the physical and digital space around you, well, look at your room, your desk, your home, the apps on your phone, the calendar for your week.
What is it building?
Right. What kind of existence is it architected to produce? Is it a machine designed to generate stress, endless distraction, and unnecessary seriousness? Are you passively living inside a blueprint drafted by someone else's expectations? Or are you ready to pick up the pen, clear the schedule, and start drawing your own complete language of transcendence? Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. You roll over, grab your phone, squint through the brightness, and open up your daily to-do list.
Right, the usual morning ritual of dread.
Exactly. But instead of seeing the usual items, like do the laundry, prep for the 10 a.m. marketing meeting, call the plumber, instead of all that, you look at the screen and see a list labeled Sacred Ceremonies.
I mean, most people would probably assume they accidentally opened a meditation app, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because our daily schedules are almost universally framed as survival mechanisms. We build these lists of obligations, frictions, and hurdles we have to clear just to get to the end of the day.
just to survive until Friday, basically.
Exactly. So the idea of waking up to a schedule framed entirely around joyful creation and contemplative presence, it feels completely alien. It challenges the fundamental way modern humans structure their existence.
It feels impossible, honestly. Like I was reviewing the source